What's up, YouTubers? So, I was supposed to make this video Wednesday, but some things came up and I decided to put it off a couple days just to make sure I get it right. But basically, this video is going to be a part of a series called Breaking the Chains of Religion. This is basically my journey through how I became an atheist. Now, prior to the age of 8, things in my life in terms of religious abuse was pretty much okay. I wasn't really abused religiously. I didn't really have religion shoved down my throat up to that point, up to the age of 8. But at the age of 8, a lot of things in my life changed. Basically, at the age of 8, I lost my childhood. It was over. I lost the innocence and all. Religion was stuffed down my throat. A lot of things started to happen very quickly at the age of 8. But basically, when I was 8 years old, I had a friend. Now, I didn't really have many friends. And in fact, you shouldn't even call them friends. You should more or less call them peers, classmates. I really did not relate to anyone. So, that was that. But I did have one particular friend, truly a friend. He was my best friend, possibly truly my only friend. And at this particular time, I didn't know what an atheist was. I didn't know what it meant to not believe in God. Well, unfortunately, I found out that, well, I didn't find out, but the teacher realized that this guy that I was hanging around with, his father and his mother was an atheist, and so presumably he was an atheist. And she didn't like the idea of me hanging out with an atheist. Now, of course, I didn't know what an atheist was, and I would not later find out what an atheist was until age 14, was when I would find out what an atheist was. But nonetheless, the teacher decides to tell my mother about this incident, about me being friends with this atheist. So, prior to this, my mother and I and my family, we went to church, but not that often. And we definitely didn't go to Sunday school. Well, this was all about to change, because this morning we got up early and we went to Sunday school, which was very abnormal. And then we went to church services. And when I got to church services, I was forced to sit on the very front pulpit. Now, basically, sitting on this very front pulpit was very embarrassing to me. I didn't want to be sitting up here with the old folks. They stink. You know how children stink. So I was very furious with this alone. But this was nothing compared to what was about to happen. This was a Baptist church. This was the church that my mother took me to. Now, basically, I was the subject of the sermon that day. When the preacher was there delivering his sermon, the whole thing was directed toward me. He even called my name out a couple times, pointing at me. It's like he was shouting at me, just completely ridiculing me in front of the entire congregation. It was embarrassing. And I'm the whole time sitting here thinking, what's going on? And basically he's saying things about, be careful who you be friends with. The devil's going to get to you. You're just as guilty. And I'm thinking this whole time, what's going on? Because I'm just a kid. And then he said he wanted to see me after church. Of course, he announced us from the whole congregation. So, this is like, oh, this is even more embarrassing. Well, I went to see him out church services, and that's when he told me that my mother had told him about the situation of me befriending and someone who doesn't. He didn't use the word atheist. He said someone who doesn't believe in a God. So naturally, I still didn't know what an atheist was. He said that someone who didn't believe in God. That I can't be around them. That it was a bad thing. And I was pretty furious. And later I would find out that it was the teacher who told my mother in the first place. Well, basically, my mother then told me that I was not going to be. She made me get on my knees and pray for hours. My knees was hurting; they were sore. I wanted to get up. She wouldn't let me. And then she told me that I was not going to be able to befriend him anymore. I need to stay away from him, and I did so. Even though I felt deep down inside that this was wrong, I did so. I stayed away from him, and so a couple years later, he believed at school, and I would never get to apologize to him or what happened, or really get to be friends with him again. I don't know what happened to the guy. I won't mention any names out of respect for people, but I don't know what happened to the guy. So that moment, though, of me being ridiculed in the church, things changed. Shortly after that, like maybe a month or so after that, I found out that my mother was HIV positive. So my childhood was pretty much gone with all the things that I had been hit with those past couple months. So that was the point of basically starting to have religion shoved down my throat. After that, my brother and I, we had to go to Sunday school every Sunday. We had to go to Bible study every Wednesday. And we had to go to church services every Sunday. When I was in Sunday school, but particularly Bible study, I would ask questions because I already immediately recognized that something was not right. There was a lot of contradictions, a lot of confusions in the Bible. Now, at first, I chopped this up to me being just a kid and don't understand, but when I would ask the adults and the so-called experts, I would basically be told, start asking questions, be quiet, because ultimately they didn't know the answer to the questions, or they couldn't give a satisfactory answer to the questions. I would be put in the corner. There was even a couple of incidents where I was told that I could not come back to Bible study for a couple of weeks, basically suspended from Bible study. And of course my mother would make me pray, and she would say that it's my fault, and I would get a whooping, and so on. Well, about the age of 10, I started to basically read the Bible for myself as much as I could. I mean, I'm 10 years old, so naturally I had a lot of problems with the words in the Bible. I couldn't understand them. But I also begun to kind of study other religions, explore to see what else was out there, and I found that there was a whole lot of other choices out there. And basically, reading a little bit of Bible that I was reading, and trying to understand it, and trying to understand religion in general, I was very afraid of where it was leading me. Basically, my whole life, I had been taught that God is everything, and without Him I'm nothing, and I will fail. So this was very frightening, to basically be leading myself potentially away from God. So I stopped. I stopped studying other religions. I stopped trying to understand I just stopped, and I just gave in. I went back to church, and I said, I'm just going to accept all the stuff they tell me, even if it don't make sense, because I can't understand God. I'm not meant to understand God. I'm just meant to submit. Well, that was going to change pretty soon, because ultimately my mother was growing more and more ill. Ultimately, I was still facing this crisis of realizing that things in the Bible just didn't make sense. Never mind what everybody is saying, never mind submitting, never mind the fact that the people appeared to be happy, or appeared to have this type of high with this religion. It just didn't make sense. And it wasn't just being a Baptist. I mean, I realized this at 8 and 10 years old, and it wasn't just about being Baptist or being whatever. That basically just religion for me, and this whole concept of God for me, just didn't make any sense. So when I was 13 years old, my mother passed. Now, I had a swarm of questions about God prior to this, but I couldn't pursue this. I mean, I was afraid to pursue this. First off, my parents, my mother, my siblings, my family, they would definitely frown upon this. It just wasn't going to happen. And I definitely didn't want to do anything to upset my mother. And things were fine. I was dealing with it. After my mother passed, though, this was the turning point in my life. Things changed rapidly. In fact, things changed within a period of a year. Basically, I almost immediately just had this thought that, this is it. I'm in this world alone now. My mother is gone. It's time to get real. It's time to examine some places in my life. And one of the places that I wanted to examine was my faith. Is it still worth holding on to this type of faith? Not just because I was angry about my mother's death, which I really wasn't angry about that because I had expected that for some time. The whole concept was, is this God concept really real? Because I'm about to invest a lot of emotion, a lot of time in this, and I want to make sure I get this right. I'm going to get down to the truth of the matter. And this time, regardless where it takes me, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to continue to press forward. So, when I did this, basically I started out at the age of 13. And it didn't take me long. Now, looking back at this situation, a lot of people trying to say that the reason why I became an atheist was because of my mother's death and it was too much for a child to handle and I wasn't supposed to be able to handle it. That's all bullshit. It really had extremely little to do with my mother's death, because remind you, I was already questioning this religion prior to my mother's death, some 5 years prior to my mother's death. So it really had extremely little to do with this. But, in fact, at age 14, though I would not stop studying various religions and what's not and reading the Bible, I had got done with a great deal of the Bible and had already reached the conclusion that this God was not real, that God in general is not real. But I took an agnostic standpoint. I declared myself an agnostic. I figured out what an agnostic was. I figured out what it meant to be an atheist. I decided to declare myself an agnostic. Now, subconsciously, I was doing this because I wanted to avoid the consequences of being an atheist. I wanted to avoid the negative stigma, the isolation, being ridiculed by my family. I wanted to avoid all of this subconsciously. This is why I declared myself an agnostic. Because I was afraid of the term of atheist. I was afraid of what it would bring to me. So that's why I declared myself an agnostic. But looking back at this today, I give myself credit at that point of being an atheist, because truly at that point I was an atheist. Now perhaps I was an atheist long before that. Perhaps I've been an atheist my entire life. But looking back at the whole situation in its totality, at that moment, surely I had become an atheist. I would go on to study various religions. I would not give up. And ultimately, this will lead me to a bigger concept and a bigger decision that I will ultimately make shortly hereafter, basically deciding that I was an agnostic. But this is going to conclude this video for this week. I will be posting another video next week on Wednesday, basically continuing the story on all the way up to my current point in life now. Peace.
But think twice. That's my only advice. Come on now, who do you think you are? Bless your soul. You really think you're Since I was little, it looked like